I've now used the Osmo Pocket 4 for a month, and although the camera on the surface is almost identical to its predecessor, the Pocket 3, there are 4 things I don't want to do without now that I've gotten used to them. And funnily enough, it's more about functionality than image quality. Although I've actually also found an improvement there that no one else is talking about. And by the way, there's now also this. It's not because the image quality in the Pocket 4 hasn't improved, it has. The camera has a new version of the Pocket 3's 1-inch sensor with a somewhat higher dynamic range, and that means it can better handle high contrasts. So there is, for example, less risk of very bright areas being overexposed. You can see it quite clearly in this evening recording from my trip to China. On the Pocket 3, the light from the large screen overwhelms the sensor, so the bright areas are overexposed. But the improved dynamic range in the Pocket 4 captures all the details. However, I've also discovered another improvement when filming in the evening that I haven't heard others talk about. If you've ever filmed in the evening with an iPhone, you've probably also experienced that bright lights create some rather unfortunate reflections on the recording. This is something iPhones have struggled with for years, and the Pocket 3 actually has a bit of the same problem, as you can see on this recording. But on the Pocket 4, the problem is almost completely gone, which is a pleasant surprise. The thing is, unless you mostly film in the evening or in very demanding situations light-wise, you won't experience any major improvements. It's a bit like with smartphones. If the lighting is good enough, there's usually not a huge difference from generation to generation. So if you primarily film in normal lighting, the jump from the 3 to the 4 isn't that big when it comes to image quality. But on the other hand, there are other things in the Pocket 4 that, at least for me, make a huge difference. Something I initially didn't think would mean much, but which has turned out to be super useful, is the custom button to the right under the screen. In the menu, or by just holding the button down, you can choose 3 different functions for it to control when you either single, double, or triple click it. I've set it to rotate the camera with 1 click so I can easily switch between filming myself or what's in front of me. You can also just triple click the joystick like on the Pocket 3, but a single click is faster and it minimizes the risk of errors or shaky recordings. It works incredibly well when, for example, vlogging with the camera. But there's another function that has also proven to be super useful, and it's linked to 2 other new features in the Pocket 4. You can actually set the custom button to switch between 2 different presets with either a single or double click. Until now, when I've recorded B-roll for my car reviews, I've used my iPhone to record in 4 times slow motion to get some nice, smooth pans. The Pocket 3 can also record in 4 times slow motion, but it's hard to keep the object in the center of the frame with a mechanical gimbal. Normally, you can use the ActiveTrack feature to keep the camera focused on a specific area, but it just doesn't work in slow motion on the Pocket 3. It does, however, work on the Pocket 4, and not only that. Here I can record in 8 times slow motion in 4K, so I can get even slower and smoother pans. And because I can also use ActiveTrack to keep the subject centered in the frame, it's super easy to make great recordings. That's why I've set a double click on the custom button to switch between the preset I use for normal shots and the one I use for slow motion B-roll, so I can quickly switch between them while filming. And it just works incredibly well. However, that's not the only improvement when it comes to ActiveTrack. But before I show you the rest, we need to cover the 3rd new feature that has significantly improved my workflow. On a typical day, I often end up with between 40 and 50 gigabytes of video files that need to be transferred to my computer. I do this by connecting the camera via USB-C and then dragging them onto my hard drive. The Pocket 3 only transfers at USB 2 speeds. That means no more than about 40 megabytes per second. So 40 gigabytes typically takes 15 minutes to transfer. I could also take the micro SD card out and put it in a card reader and then do it about twice as fast. But that's a hassle and not always practical. The Pocket 4, on the other hand, now supports USB 3.1, so I don't need to put the card in a card reader to get the better speed. But that's not the biggest news. The camera also comes with 107 gigabytes of internal memory, which is more than enough to hold a full day's worth of footage, and that memory is much faster than an SD card. When I copy video from the Pocket 4's internal storage, I can reach over 750 megabytes per second, so 40 gigabytes takes less than 50 seconds to copy. And when you do that several times a week like I do, it becomes a huge time saver. So I've started only using the internal memory in the Pocket 4. I also have an SD card in the camera in case I run out of space, but that hasn't happened yet. One of the new features in the new camera is the 2x lossless zoom, which we actually also got in the Pocket 3 in a firmware update. But honestly, I don't think there's a huge difference in quality. However, the Pocket 4 still improves the feature in several ways. First of all, there's now a dedicated zoom button, which makes sense because you can now also use the feature while recording, which isn't possible on the Pocket 3. Here you have to select the zoom setting before you start recording, and it can't be changed during the process. This means that if you've zoomed in to get closer to a subject, but then want to zoom out during the shot to show more of the surroundings, well, that's not possible on the Pocket 3. But it is now possible on the Pocket 4. Another thing that's possible on the Pocket 4 is the ability to use ActiveTrack while zoomed in, so you can, for example, get a more pronounced parallax effect when panning around an object. And that brings us back to the ActiveTrack feature, which I'm personally extra excited about. Not only does it now work in slow motion, and when you're zoomed in, it's also much better at tracking than it is in the Pocket 3. The very fact that the camera can automatically track people and objects was one of the primary reasons I originally chose the Pocket 3, because it allows me to create more dynamic recordings, even when I'm filming alone. But even though it works well in the Pocket 3, it's next level in the Pocket 4. The Pocket 3 has this problem where if you briefly disappear from the frame when tracking yourself, the tracking stops. This means you always have to be aware of whether the camera can see you, otherwise you risk a whole recording being wasted because the camera suddenly points the wrong way. I've experienced that several times, but in the Pocket 4, the tracking is much more intelligent, so it remembers what you look like and resumes tracking automatically when the camera sees you again. This means you can relax more when you're recording because you don't have to worry about your virtual cameraman. At the same time, it allows for some recordings that just aren't possible with the Pocket 3. For example, this clip where I get out of a car, close the door, and then walk in front of the car while the camera tracks me the whole way. To get that shot, I have to start the tracking before I close the car door while the camera can still see me. And if it had been with the Pocket 3, the tracking would have stopped when the door closed. But because the Pocket 4 remembers what I look like, it continues tracking when I open the door again, and it just works perfectly. But there are even more improvements. As mentioned, ActiveTrack can't just track people, but also objects, by double tapping on the small screen on what you want to track. And here, the Pocket 4 is also much more intelligent. If, for example, you want to track a car to make a slow pan, something I often need, and which I used a lot when I was at the Beijing Auto Show recently, well, the Pocket 4 is much better at maintaining tracking because the system can simply see that it's a vehicle and therefore dynamically adjusts the tracked area, even if the perspective changes. If you try the same on the Pocket 3, the camera doesn't know what it's seeing, so it just tracks an area without understanding the object, and therefore the tracking often fails. Overall, the system in the Pocket 4 is much better at holding onto the object you're tracking, even if the perspective changes. And if it briefly loses tracking because something gets in the way, well, it locks onto it again when the object reappears. Again, this is something the Pocket 3 often has problems with. So for me, ActiveTrack 7.0 is one of the major upgrades. In addition to the 4 things I've mentioned here, which are the main reasons the Pocket 4 will be my primary camera from now on, there are also a number of other new features you don't get in the Pocket 3. And I think I'll end up being happy with a couple of those as well. The camera now has 6 built-in film tones, so you can get a specific look for your video directly during recording without having to mess with color grading and the like afterwards. Personally, it's not something I use, but if you want to record video with a slightly different look, well, it's an easy way to do it. If you'd rather color grade yourself, the Pocket 4 is also an improvement, as it now supports real D-Log instead of the simpler D-Log M profile found in the Pocket 3 and DJI's action cams. You can also use face recognition by saving a photo of yourself in the camera and then setting it to always focus on you whenever it's recording. This should be handy if you're recording in a place with lots of people around you, but I haven't needed that feature myself just yet. It also works with another feature that I could definitely see myself using, which is gesture control. Once the camera recognizes you, you can start and stop tracking yourself just by holding up a hand. And if you make the peace sign, you'll start and stop a recording. Again, this is a result of the improved tracking engine in the Pocket 4. One feature I won't be using, however, is the built-in beauty filter, but it's now available when recording on the Pocket 4. On the other hand, I think I'll really like the small fill light that's included and powered directly by the Pocket 4's built-in battery. It's much more practical than other external fill lights, which need to be charged and require extra gear just to mount them on the camera. So this is a much easier way to get some extra light on yourself when filming in dark environments. The improved joystick is now analog, so you can actually control the speed of something like a pan. I think that'll be useful from time to time, and it's definitely much better than the one on the Pocket 3. But even though I've chosen the Pocket 4 as my main camera, the question is how long it'll stay that way. Because DJI has just announced an even more extreme version called the Pocket 4P. It was shown to a select group of journalists at the Cannes Film Festival, and according to DJI, it's for people who want to produce even more stunning and cinematic footage with a pocket camera. Footage that they believe can compete with much larger setups. The Pocket 4P comes with 2 built-in lenses and is said to offer even more professional features, including a dynamic range of 17 stops, which is 3 more than the Pocket 4 and 5 more than the Pocket 3. It also features a new D-Log 2 color profile and 3 times optical zoom. We weren't told much else, and the release date and price are still unknown, but I'm guessing it'll be sometime after the summer break when the tech season kicks off again. Will I be tempted to switch yet again? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Until then, I'm super happy with the Pocket 4 and the extra possibilities it offers compared to the Pocket 3. But what do you think? Are you tempted by the new Pocket 4, or do you want to see what the Pocket 4P brings first? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to see more from my channel right away, here are some more videos for you. See you soon.